Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Motivational speaker, the comeback coach, and goal crusher Joe Rivera brings you inspiring leaders, incredible stories, and valuable lessons on how you can change, grow, and reforge your life. Now, here's your host, Joe Rivera.
What's up? What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Reforge Your Life Show. I'm your host, Joe Rivera, and here at the Reforge Your Life Show, we love to show you that the comeback is more than possible. And today, I'm excited about the guest that I'm bringing to the show, man. Y'all are going to love his energy, his story, his passion for what he does, man, is all incredible. He's the executive director at Momentum Education. Robinson Lin, welcome to the show, brother.
I'm happy to be on the show. I was looking forward to it, so I'm glad we can make it happen.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it also, man. I'm glad we were able to do it as well. Man, I've heard your story, and there's no way I'm qualified to tell it the way you can. So I'd love for you to share your story with the audience.
Yeah, that's a good where to start, right? So I'll share, thank you, Joe, for introducing me as the executive director of Momentum Education. That is an organization that was founded 22 years ago. So in June of 2003, by my mother, Robin Lin. And my mother founded Momentum after having done transformational work all over the world, from Russia to Spain to South Africa. After the immediate fall of the apartheid, she moved at that time, my entire family, to Cape Town, South Africa, to bring transformational work and work with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to support the healing of that country. So I would say my story starts by observing my mother kind of live a life of contribution and be grounded in the work, kind of her purpose. I watched her. I traveled, kind of all over the world with her. And unfortunately, my mother passed away in January of 2010 from pancreatic cancer. She had been diagnosed 3 months earlier. So she was diagnosed, and then 3 months to the day that she was diagnosed, she passed away. And at that time, I was 22, and I had just graduated from college a few months earlier. And I basically went to work the next day and became the director of the organization overnight. And Momentum is an organization that does personal and professional transformational work and looks to give people leadership and communication tools. And, quite frankly, I had to use all the tools I had received as going through through our own curriculum to become the director of an organization like that at such a young age.
Man, yeah, there's congratulations for, taking that on and becoming the executive director in the blink of an eye like that. That's not an easy step to make.
Yeah.
And your mom's shoes aren't easy shoes to fill. And I've done some work with Momentum Education, and man, what an incredible job. I don't want to give away any secret sauce, but man, oh man, what an experience. But I want to kind of rewind to, your mom's passing, and my deepest condolences. I know how it is to lose a mother physically, and what that bounce back is like. So what's going through your mind at 22 years old? You just lost your mom, your mentor, your everything at this point, and physically, and you're 22 years old, and you got to jump into, these big shoes to fill. What's going through your mind in that moment?
I mean, so much, right? I think some of it, I wasn't even clear what was going through my mind until years later, right? Because I think the grieving process can be overwhelming, and it's unique to everyone. Not everyone grieves in the same way. But I think there are some consistencies when you experience deep loss. And so for me, I had a few things going on in my mind. One, you referenced I remember very quickly. So my mother was someone who I found incredibly impressive. She was my best friend. She was someone who I thoroughly enjoyed, but I was also impressed by. I was inspired by the work she did. I was inspired by the way she did it, the way she was a facilitator, a public speaker, a business owner, all these things I had observed. And I remember thinking pretty clearly, and my mother also had like an avid shoe collection. She loved shoes, right? So when you said fill in her shoes, it sparked something. And I just remember thinking like, no matter what I do, I won't be able to fill her heels, right? I had never walked in heels, wasn't trying to, or something of that nature, right? And so it gave me a little bit of a freedom to think, well, if I try to do an imitation of my mother, who at that
Mm.
point, when she passed, was 58 years old, if I'm trying to be a 22-year-old pretending to be a person of her life experience, her maturity, her wisdom, then I'm going to be really setting myself up to fail. And so I remember thinking, now that I'm in this role from as a business owner and as a facilitator, um, I really wanted, and a coach, I wanted to say, I really wanted to spend the time to get clear on what would be my authentic voice, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to do her voice any justice. But I thought if I was able to identify what my authentic voice was, then at the very least, people would be able to experience me as opposed to experience someone pretending to be someone else.
Mm. I love that, and that's so important for the audience to pick up on, because it's easy for someone to get imposter syndrome, or get caught up in the comparisons when you have to fill a role like that. And you were able to see the opposite side of that and say, you know what, I'm going to create my own path for this, and let everyone hear my voice and my style of doing this. So man, awesome job on that. But I'm curious, what were some of those challenges when that first happened? And you had to step into this role, and what were some of the things you had to overcome?
Yeah, that's a when you ask that question to me, there's a long list, right? So, um, from a personal standpoint, I just think it was challenging to just open up my blinds every day and to get out of bed because I was experiencing such a loss on a personal level. On a professional level, I was taking over an organization that had impacted thousands of people. We have had uh, thousands of people go through our workshops at that point. Currently, we've had up to 45,000 different graduates participate in our curriculums, but at that time, it was still in the thousands. We had a lot of professional development clients. And I think some of the challenges were, one, trusting myself just to be able to be in that position, right? Clearly, my mother had trusted me, but just because she had trusted me didn't mean that I trusted myself. So part of it was the internal conversation. I remember as a facilitator, we often lead workshops, and I would lead workshops, and I remember going in terrified that someone was going to ask me my age, because often I was not just, I was clearly the youngest person in the room, yet I was the one facilitating the workshop to the clients who had chosen to be there. And so I remember just being terrified. Well, what if someone asks me my age, and what if someone doesn't want to hear what I have to offer because of my age? And I remember being so scared that someone was going to ask me my age that I started sharing my age before anyone could ask it.
Mm.
So although I wasn't necessarily being asked it, by me taking that off the table, by me being transparent around it, it was no longer in the back of my mind of something that, what if happens, and what if that questions my credibility? And because I wasn't putting pressure on myself to be all knowing, then, a 22-year-old can still bring tons of value by being curious, and open. And so that's what I look to do. I look to be curious and open. From a professional standpoint, in addition, just learning overall business, that I had really no previous experience. My previous experiences were in definitely not at the top of running anything. I'll say that. And so whether it was navigating taxes, whether it was navigating um, certain employees and management and things of that nature, I think I had a lot of trial by fire and a lot of mistakes, sometimes costly mistakes,
Mm.
uh, but ones that definitely facilitated as a catalyst for accelerated learning, right? I could read the book on business and there's value in reading it, but I didn't have time to read it. I was going through it in real time and having to pivot and learn and make mistakes in real time, and often publicly as well.
That's I'm curious, because that's an important piece that you just mentioned, right? Of you could read the book on business, but you were living it while you were learning it. How valuable was that experience for you, to be able to live it while you were going through it, and not just have to be like, not having to deal with Because you know when you don't want, there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there who are waiting for the perfect time to start, and there's no such thing as that perfect time. It's an illusion. There's no better time than the present. So, how valuable was that lesson of learning as you went through the process?
That's a great question because you use the word valuable. And if you had said the word enjoyable, I'd probably have a different answer. But, but you use the word valuable, and I can't even put a number. It's hard to even articulate how valuable that time was.
Yeah.
And what I learned about myself and what I learned about others and what I learned about kind of my leadership styles, the things that work about me, the things that don't work about me, the things that I have to kind of make sure I'm aware of. I mean, there was so much I learned. And in hindsight, I would have loved to have had, some on the job learning and training before that. But once I was in the position, the accelerated learning, I'm always a big fan of kind of what you're saying. If you're waiting for the perfect time, there'll never be a perfect time. Even me becoming the director was against the backdrop of the 2008, 2010, 9 recession, right? And so I was literally becoming the director of an organization at one of the worst economic times in several decades for our country. Um, but I was learning in real time and I was pivoting. And one of the things I was grateful for was that I had a team of people I could learn with and from, but I also tried to be a quick learner in terms of not wanting to if I did make a mistake, trying not to make that same mistake a second time, right? I'm all about learning lessons. When possible, I'd like to not learn the same lessons over and over again.
Yeah, that's the definition of insanity, right? Trying the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. You got to learn from those mistakes.
Yeah.
So I want to go back though to the whole 2008 and bringing a business, trying to carry a business through that, and the challenges that you experienced there. Because here you are, 22 years old, and you're going through those challenges. And 2008 was a tough time for this economy. It was a tough time for any business out there. So, what was what was it that you held on to keep pushing forward? Because I'm sure that there's times of, you know what, fuck this, I don't want to do it no more. I just give up. This is not, it's not what, as entrepreneurs we go through that numerous amount of times. So what was something that you held on to that helped you push through that difficult time?
Thanks for asking that question because I don't always think about in this time, that particular time. And so I think a few things that jumped out to me was one, I really believe in the work that Momentum Education does, right? The work of helping people connect with their hearts, finding ways for people to express their authenticity, finding ways for them to communicate and really go after dreams. And so it was great that was the work we offer as an organization because I felt like, you remember the commercial? I used to watch the commercial where there was I think it was like a hair loss for men, and someone on the commercial, the guy would say, "And I'm not just the president, I'm also a client." And that's how I felt, right? I wasn't just running the organization, although I was running the organization. I was doing exactly what we ask our participants to do in our leadership course, right? Develop a team, communicate your message, hold the vision. And so I was doing all those things that I was asking other people to do. And I'm a big fan of not asking someone to do something I'm unwilling to do. And so for me, part of the value of that time was like, okay, this is the leadership book we give to our participants. Now I'm going to try this on and actually practice it in real time. That was from a practical standpoint around just articulating my vision. And I think something that I did very well at that time was I shared what my hope was. I shared what my vision was. I shared what the challenges were that I was experiencing. I didn't find myself isolating. And I have a tendency at times when there's a challenge to like try to go solve it in a cave by myself. And then once I've solved it, I'll reemerge and tell the world about, what I solved. But the challenges of that time were so overwhelming that I didn't put pressure on myself to try to go through it alone. And I think by sharing not just what the challenges were, but also by sharing with people what I was looking to accomplish, what the goal was, what the vision was. It provided opportunities for people to step up and support me. It provided opportunities for me to have to clarify my vision, because if I'm sharing it with someone else, I want to make sure that I'm clear on what I'm actually sharing. And so those are some of those things that kind of guided me during that time.
And I think something that's really valuable that I want the audience to pick up on is the fact of not doing it alone and how vital that is. And it comes up often when I talk with entrepreneurs and business leaders who've overcome adversity to be able to create a comeback. And I would say if I mean nothing in the world is 100%, right? So I would say 99.9% of them all mention not having to do it alone and how important it is to lean on your support system to be able to go through those challenges, because entrepreneurship could be a lonely place, and it could be a place where you feel like you're in stuff alone in these challenges, and you don't have to be, and you could reach out and say, you know what, I need help on this because I can't do this alone. How important was that support system for you, and still is through this journey?
I mean, it's the reason you're able to talk to me today,
Yeah.
right? Without that support system, there's no momentum 15 years later.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know what I would be doing professionally, but I'm grateful I don't have to know what I would be doing professionally because I love what I do. But that support system, and I'm able to identify, the support I had in that season and the ways in which, in different seasons of my life, my request for support, my need for support, the type of support has changed. But I think you kind of hit it right on the head, where for so many entrepreneurs, it's a very lonely experience. And I
Mhm.
think that loneliness doesn't make anyone more effective as a business leader, right? I think the lack of collaboration or the lack of um, community at times can be very isolating. And so, yeah, I don't think, quite frankly, I think about, I needed support with learning our payroll system and managing, a checkbook at that time, right? Those are some things that are like, business 101 in certain ways, but I didn't have that previous experience. I was someone who came from a more creative field. And so, not that there's not a lot of creativity in business, right? But I kind of viewed myself as like an artistic, creative person. And then all of a sudden I'm looking at these numbers and doing all these things. So the direct mentorship I had at that time, there's clearly, I don't think I would have lasted a few more than a few months without that support. And I also think without consistent support in those 15 years since, because there's definitely been times over the last 15 years where I've been like, do I really want to do this? Or this is happening, or the world is changing, or, we were an organization that had done, 15 years of in-person programming. And then all of a sudden in 2020, it became much harder to do in-person programming. And so I had more, well, do I quit now? Do I pivot? And I'm really grateful that I have a support system, and that I'm also able to, like, I reach out to my support system, because I think there's a difference between having a support system and reaching out to your support system. There are people in my life who I know have a support system, but I know they don't reach out, they don't utilize it. And I'm very grateful that I've been able to lean on my team, and my team's been able to lean on me. And because of that, I'm able to do what I do, which and impact so many people. But I definitely wouldn't be able to do it by myself.
Yeah. What a blessing it is to know that we don't have to do it by ourselves, right? And
No.
we can and also delegate those responsibilities that we don't want to deal with, so that we could be the best at what we do, and lead the way we were born to lead. So I'm curious though, because I believe that um, scratch the I believe part. I want to. I have a question before I get into that. Um, when we go through these challenges in our life, there's a belief system that we have to crack through and build a new belief system. These limited beliefs. What was some of the limited beliefs that you had to overcome through this journey from, the day you stepped into that role?
Yeah, I mean, one of the ones that jumps out to me, and it was the first one that jumped out when you asked that question, but and I've said this to others, but I think it was very valuable for me, is that if I think my dreams or my goals are about me, then it's much easier to let go of them because I'm only letting myself down. Right. So if I'm only thinking about what I want to accomplish from a professional standpoint or the business standpoint of like, oh, I want X, Y, or Z, then, well, if I don't go after it, then I'm only letting myself down. And I think often motivation for just ourselves isn't enough of a catalyst to have people go through like the challenges that come. Right. And so I say that to say that for me, one of the limiting beliefs or something that I was constantly checking in with is like, how much do I think this matters to others? And if I think it matters to others, then I'm less willing to give up. I'm less willing to kind of stop at the initial challenge. Right. I think about it as like the person who's looking to run a marathon. Like if they're looking to run a marathon, that's a great motivation if they want the medal. If they're looking to run a marathon so that they can live healthy and be there for the other people in their lives and have the passion that comes with being expressed physically, whatever it happens to be, they're probably more likely to go out for that run when it's cold and raining that day. And so for me, I had to think about the people I wanted to impact and remove some of the self-concern, right? If I'm concerned about if people think what people think of me or if I'm too young or any of those things, then my focus is on me. My focus is not on the impact I'm looking to have. And so I was consistently at that time reframing, well, what's the impact I want to have? And I remember when my mother was diagnosed, she was diagnosed on a Wednesday. And on a Thursday, we went to get a second opinion. And the doctor, said, are you comfortable having this conversation with your son in the room? And she said, yes. And the doctor said, well, if there's anything you haven't done, now would be the time to do it, which was a very sobering, impactful statement. And I remember my mother saying to the doctor that she was a fighter and was going to fight as long as she could, as hard as she could, but there was nothing she wanted to do that she hadn't done. And for me, that became a compass. I wanted to impact people through our workshops in such a way that whenever they reached the end of their life, if they were ever to be asked that question, that there wasn't any regrets. There wasn't any, I wish I had. It was more so, wow, I'm really grateful for what I have done. And so that became a compass that really broke through whenever I was having limited beliefs about my own ability or my own, worthiness. Because then I was able to say, well, why would I shrink the impact I'm looking to have just to me?
Yeah, man, that reframing it is vital to crack through that limited belief. In order to overcome it, you got to reframe it, and first you got to own it,
Correct.
and then reframe it. So what what was the turning point for you where you were able to start reframing it and saying, you know what, I don't have to believe that I'm not worthy. I don't have to believe that I'm too young. Now I could just speak my truth and tell people beforehand that what my age is, because what you did there, I don't know if the audience picked up on this, man, and it's so powerful, is you chose to face your fear rather than running away from it when you flip that narrative of the age thing. So at what point though was the turning point for you to say, I don't have to allow these beliefs or this belief system to own me. I could own it and reframe it.
Yeah, I think a big turning point was about a year into my tenure as the director, and it was coming up on a year of my mother's passing. And I was feeling, although I was leaning on my team, transparently, I'd also probably had put some people on my team who I don't think I would have put on my team if I didn't wasn't coming from a belief that I wasn't enough. Right. So there are certain people who I have to have this person on my team. They have more experience or they know better than I do. And although there's value to them, there's value in understanding when you have shortcomings or someone else has an expertise in a field. I think I, at that time, was surrounding myself with people who I was like hoping they would have the right answer. And then the pressure wouldn't be on me to have to come up with it.
Mm.
And I was getting advice from a professional standpoint that just didn't sit well with me. And it was from people who were experienced, it was from people who had tenure, but it was from people who have a different core come from than me. And so I didn't feel, even when I would be moving forward in that direction with them, it didn't sit right with me. And I remember having a conversation with a mentor, and she asked me, well, when was the last time your gut was wrong? And it was a really pivotal moment because over that year, I had made mistakes. I had done things, that I would do differently in the future. But the biggest mistakes had come from me not listening to my gut, of going forward with what someone else said was a good idea, and then me be the one that just didn't sit well, right? I remember waking up early at night and recanting, like, should I have done this or should I have done Y? And it just made me think that moving forward, I was going to really trust myself and do the work to identify, like, what's my gut, and my gut for me being in relationship to what's intrinsic to my values versus what is an automatic reaction that could be coming from fear or scarcity or anything of that nature. And so that question, when was the last time your gut was wrong, had me really want to say, well, okay, moving forward, I'm going to have to trust my gut, because even if I make the mistake, that's what's going to have me be able to sleep well at night.
I love that, the trust in the gut thing. That kind of flows into like intuition and also decision making, which is vital as a business person to be able to move the needle in your business. Because if you start second guessing and you start procrastinating on the decision, man, it's just a downward spiral from there. So how important was, trusting your gut towards making decisions, everyday business decisions, everyday decisions in your life? And what's the transformation that you've seen from that?
Great question. So I think a few things, right? I think some of the biggest business success we've had has been things that I just had to make the decision based on what felt right at that time, versus sometimes there's all the evidence in one direction, but if it doesn't feel right, I don't think I'm going to be able to embrace it. Or on the aside, you can lose the opportunity spending so much time debating whether or not you should take it. So what comes to mind is two things. One is the work. If you're going to be someone who's looking to trust your gut, and I'll speak for myself, then the work that you have to do in order to be able to actually know what's your gut versus something else, right? If I'm not eating well, if I'm not getting enough rest, if I'm, letting certain things fester in my personal life, all those things weigh on my ability to decipher what's my gut versus what's actually just, my first reaction on a day where I'm cranky because I haven't gotten enough rest in a couple weeks, right? And so doing the work to be able to hear, I heard someone say actually to my wife once that anxiety is loud, your intuition is soft. And so you have to be able to do the work to be able to listen to the soft things that are coming up when there's a lot of loudness happening around. And for me, the biggest one that jumps out is in 2020. I remember we as an organization have primarily done in-person offerings, right? In-person workshops, known for the experience, known for the community that's present. And I remember being like, I was actually at the gym. I just finished my workout, and I remember feeling, it was March of 2020. I remember feeling uncomfortable being at the gym with all that I had been reading in the news about COVID at that time. And I just thought to myself, well, if I'm uncomfortable here, why would I ask people to come into my physical space and do a training with us at this time? And so we ended up, that moment, like I had that insight that moment. The next day I woke up and said, hey team, we have to reschedule all of our trainings. And at that point, we're just looking at a 2-week mark, but we probably rescheduled when it's all said and done, about 1,000 people in multiple different cities. And if I had waited a few more days, those people would have been in the middle of the training and would have been told, I think in New York City, for example, I think we were told on Friday that there was no more gatherings. Me jumping over doing a few days earlier was able to then put my clients up where we could actually reschedule, as opposed to them starting experience and then having it be pulled away from them in the middle. And so during that time in particular, I had to really as someone who had never been on a Zoom before, I had to really trust my gut that one, it was going to be vital for people to still be able to find ways to connect and to not isolate. And two, that the work we offer is valuable enough that if we find the right platform to deliver it, people can receive it. And we ended up working with, that year, over 4,500 different people worldwide. And I think over 4,500 different people and people from over 40 countries. And we never would have been able to do that if I wasn't trusting my gut to find a new way to deliver the work we were doing.
Trusting your gut and making that decision,
Correct.
not second guessing. So powerful. Glad you shared that with the audience. And it's so important to understand how powerful, number one, your intuition is, and number two, of how powerful it is as a business owner to make that decision, as a business leader to make that decision and stick to it and stick to your gut. So, Robinson, I'm curious, bro. There's, because I believe that when we crack through a belief system, we build a new belief system. And when we build that new belief system, there's core values that are
Yep.
uncovered in that process. And those core values we're able to kind of lean into to overcome other challenges that we go through in life. Because guess what, y'all? This ride to success, it's not a straight ride to the top. There's going to be bumps in the road. Shit's going to get fucked up. You got to learn how to navigate through those bumps in the road. And that's where the growth is. And your core values is something you lean into to get through those bumps in the road. So what are some of the core values that were uncovered for you and that you lean into now when you go through those challenges?
Yeah, that's a great one. So one, the first one that jumps to mind, and maybe two that jump to mind. The first one is leading with love, right? And what I mean by that is that even if it's the right decision, if it's not delivered with love, if it's not thought out from me a loving place, then the impact won't be what I'd like it to be, right? So I've had conversations where I've had to let people go, where I've fired people, but I've been able to lead with love in such a way that they are, still, they're sending a testimonial about why they still love the organization, or we're still able to have a personal relationship. And that to me is my core value, is making sure that people's are honored and respected in my presence, and that the work we do honors and loves, kind of puts more love on the planet. And because I feel like the world, you talk about the roller coaster, right? But, and all the ups and downs, but I don't know too many people who think there's too much joy on the planet currently. Right. And I think the world can be harsh enough where I don't have to be leading from a harsh standpoint. So the first one is just, that was the core value that was delivered to me, that what would be the loving thing to do, even if sometimes the loving thing to do includes being loving to myself, right? Or giving myself grace when I've made a mistake, or moving on quickly when, it's time to have a quick recovery from a challenge, or whatever that happens to be. The second core major value for me is the idea of really wanting to make sure I practice this with myself as well as others, but the experience of making sure people know that they matter. Because I feel like when you know that you matter, and a mentor, her name's Sylvia High, shared this with me, but the idea when you know you matter, you realize there's nothing you can't do, even if there's some things you won't do. And I think for so many people, potential becomes a dirty word in their life, right? They have the potential to do this, or they've been told they have great potential, but they're not acting on it. And I think when you really get clear on how much you matter, and then how much it then matters to maximize whatever your contribution is on the planet, I think there's a different urgency in which we treat it. And so for me, it's been looking to support people in understanding that they matter, but also having to, give that same lesson to myself.
Love that. Leading with love is so important. Also, I'm glad you mentioned that as one of the core values, because you're right, man. There's a lot of people out there who, don't have enough joy and bring enough joy into the world. And it's sad, because there should be more joy around the world. And when you lead with love, you're leading with that intention of bringing more joy into the world. So, man, that's so important. Robertson, I'd love for you to share with the audience, what you're doing now at Momentum, because I think it's incredible. And by the way, I just want to take this time out to acknowledge you and just say that I'm grateful that you didn't give up, and I'm grateful that you decided to create your own path with this. And maybe you looked at it like not filling your mom's shoes, but you created your own path. I seen your shoe game, bro. So your shoe game's on point too. But
I appreciate that.
you created your own path by walking in your own shoes. But what you are doing is continuing your mom's legacy, bro. And man, it is just incredible what you guys are doing over there. So I'd love for you to share with the audience what you're doing now and where they can find you.
Great. No, I appreciate that. And if if my mother hadn't, passed what I'll call like a baton, and if I hadn't reached for it, then you and I wouldn't have met in the way that we met and be able to have this conversation now. So I appreciate that acknowledgement. And for as an organization, we're about kind of what I just said. We're about supporting people with leading with love and understanding that they matter and that the dreams and goals they have matter, and how do we then give them tools to accomplish those. So as an organization, we're currently doing in-person programming in New York City and Washington, D.C. And we typically do in-person workshops in those areas that are meant to have people come with clarity, or come to receive clarity, and then additional tools to accomplish what's on their heart, whether it's professional or personal dreams. And I think about, the people who listen to your podcast are already people who probably are open to growth, and are interested in growing. So I think our workshops are meant for people with a growth mindset, but who want to make sure that they have the tools to build the foundation that their dreams can be sustained on. And so we currently do workshops in New York City and Washington, D.C. that are open to the public. And then from a professional development standpoint, we work with many different organizations on giving their staff the tools to be the most effective they can. So whether we work with colleges and universities like George Washington University and Columbia University, we work with federal organizations like NIH and GSA, the Peace Corps. We work with state organizations and city organizations. I would say our biggest client currently is the New York City Department of Education, where we work with staff, students, and also parents and guardians of children to make sure that everyone has the tools to support young people in thriving. So I would say you can, look us up at momentumeducation.com. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well, Robinson Lynn. But I would say typically my interest is curiosity on the ways in which we can most support others in accomplishing what's on their hearts.
I love that you guys are doing the schools, man, because there's such a need for that personal development in schools. And it helps. It helps that you guys are doing that, because the school system could definitely use that without a doubt, man.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions that I ask my guests when they come on the show is, the first, when you hear the word purpose, what does that mean to you?
To me, when I hear the word purpose, the image that comes to mind is like a compass. And if I was going to do a more up-to-date version, because I don't know how many of us are walking around with compasses in our in our pockets. So to me, like a more up-to-date version is like your GPS on your phone or in your car. I feel like purpose is what tells you when to take a left turn, when to take a right, when to go straight, when to circle back around. And I think about, with the GPS system, if you make a wrong turn, it reroutes you. And so you can still reach your destination. And I feel like purpose, when you're so clear on your purpose, there might be different paths to get there, but you're constantly being rerouted to the goal that you have in mind or where you're supposed to be going, as opposed to being, either aimless or feeling overly influenced by what where other people think you should be going.
And I love that one, man. The GPS. I'm gonna borrow that, brother. That's a good one, man. So when you hear the word reforge, what comes to mind?
The first thing that comes to mind when I hear the word reforge is resiliency, right? There's a inside of it. So, the first thing is like a forging has already occurred. And to me, a reforging means that now history has happened, challenges have happened, and there being that reforging is an opportunity to still be to account for all those things, to address those things. But to me, it feels more inspiring to be on the other side, having gone through those challenges and reforging, than the piece, something that has never gone through it, has has been unopened and just left on the shelf. Um, that's what comes to mind there.
Love that. And yeah, man, resiliency is vital if you're looking to reforge your life, yo. It's so important. It's such an important tool to have in your tool belt. And so there's somebody out there right now, bro, who doesn't have the whereabouts, doesn't have the tools, doesn't have the know-hows, and they're looking to reforge their life, whether it's their business, their marriage, their health, their financials, somewhere in one of those domains of their life, they're looking to reforge. What's one piece of advice that you could give that person?
So there's something I've heard my father say, who I believe this gets mentioned in 12-step recovery programs, but the idea that your mind is a dangerous place to walk alone. Right, your mind is a dangerous place to walk alone. So you gave multitude of different examples where someone could be looking to reforge their life or restart or move through challenges. And the first part of advice from me would be to not go through it alone. Right. So whether it's sharing with someone in your life who you trust, hey, this is what I'm looking to accomplish. If you have that person who's always like ready to cheer you on, hey, how can you hold me accountable? How can I hold you accountable? If you are clear that there's an overwhelming aspect with the finance or professional aspect, there are people who what seems overwhelming to you is their bread and butter. And sometimes, not reaching out to someone could have you try to solve it yourself, as opposed to reaching out to someone who can help you solve it with them. And that for some might even look like reaching out to professional services, but whether it's therapeutic or of another nature, advisory. But I don't think we're meant to go through I don't think we're meant to go through life alone. To me, that also means we're not meant to go through challenges alone, but also means we're not meant to go through celebration and wins alone as well. And if you are not reaching out to people along the journey, you might reach your destination and not have as many people as you'd like to celebrate with present with you. So for me, the first piece of advice would be to find someone you can reach out to to collaborate on whatever it is you're looking to accomplish.
Yes. It's so important out there for y'all to pay attention to that jewel that's dropped, man, because again, it comes up again, not having to do things alone, asking for help, because you are who you surround yourself with, man. If you surround yourself with people who inspire you, guess what? You're going to be inspired to do more with your life. And
Absolutely.
you learn that you don't have to do this alone. And you get a lot more accomplished when you do it with other people than trying to do it on your own. Um, so, what's one thing that this audience doesn't know about you that you enjoy doing for fun?
Okay, well, music is my big passion and love. Before Momentum, I was intending to be a world famous rapper. That part has changed, right? My purpose is still to impact people in a different way. But I don't think people, if you're new to me, you don't know that. If you've known me for a little bit, then you're very aware of that. So music's like my big passion, my big love. And I'm grateful that we've been able to also, music's a big part of the work we do at Momentum, right? There's ways in which I think music can be a universal language of connection. And so in our workshops, the work we do, we really utilize music to have people connect with their own form of expression. And it doesn't always look like singing and dancing and from them, right? But it's looking like, well, what is on your heart, right? Because the person who's a welder, that's a piece of art, right? The person who loves finding the details of a spreadsheet, that's an artistic ability as well, right? And so how do we find ways to have people connect with their expression? And to me, music's one of the best ways. And so I'm someone who loves music, and I'm grateful I get to utilize it personally and professionally.
Well, man, listen, I'm glad that you gave up the rap career because you're doing what you're doing now, but you're still dropping bars and still on stage, just in a different format, brother. That's all
I
I'm
appreciate
saying. But man, listen, thank you so much for coming through on the show, bro. I really appreciate it. I knew that you were going to come through and bring the knowledge, bring the energy, and you did that and even more, Robinson. Really, man, I really appreciate you coming through, bro.
Thank you, Joe. This was a pleasure.
Yeah, man. Thank you. And for all the listeners and viewers out there, thank y'all for checking it out, listening, watching. And don't forget, I'm going to ask what I always ask, LFSS, like, follow, subscribe, and share, because there's somebody out there right now who's not watching the show, who's not listening to it, and they're looking to reforge their life, whether it's in their business, their finances, their health, their marriage, whatever it is. And you sharing this episode or past episodes to help save their life, save their marriage, save their business, save their health, whatever it is. So don't forget to share, man. Stay productive, stay purposeful, and stay blessed.
You've been listening to Reforge Your Life with your host, Joe Rivera. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Joe Rivera and how he can help you or your organization reforge your life and regain your place at the top, head on over to withjoerivera.com and follow Joe on all social platforms. The Reforge Your Life podcast was produced by Thrive Loud Productions. Thanks for listening.